Thanks for joining us here on Service School Stories. Your hosts for this season are Alec Emmert, Service School CEO and Navy veteran,
and Sydney Mathis, Chief Program Officer and former college admissions officer. This season will cover topics as it relates to higher education, military service transition, and career opportunities and outcomes for veterans. Join us as we share student stories, inside tips from the admissions office, and conversations with employers actively hiring student veterans. Here we go.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we have Shaun Cason with us. He is a senior at Princeton University and the first decorated military veteran and the first Princeton transfer student to receive the Daniel M. Sachs Class of 1960 Graduating Scholarship, one of Princeton University's highest awards to pursue graduate education at Oxford University in the UK. Before attending Princeton, he served for 15 years in special operations in the U.S. Marine Corps. Cason was deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan and received numerous commendations, including the Purple Heart. Welcome to the podcast, Shaun. So tell us your story.
Thank
What
you.
brought you into the Marine Corps and what made you decide to become a Raider?
Well, rather interesting story of how I even ended up in the military, and I think it comes full circle to how I ended up in education in the long run. I started off as a Navy brat, so kind of traveled the world and ended up getting transplanted into the South. Had my formative years in Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee. Coming out of high school, I really didn't have an idea what I wanted to do with my life, as most teenagers experience. Thought I had the world figured out, so I went directly into college right after high school, and I floundered terribly. I thought I was smarter than my professors. I thought I had the whole world figured out. So I ended up really struggling at school and not adjusting well because of my time as a Navy brat and really seeing service and traveling with the military. I felt it was just a good idea to kind of go into the military, figure out what I wanted to do with my life, give back, do a little service, and then I would continue with my education. Well, I enlisted just prior to 9/11, and I enlisted, and 9/11 happened, and it kind of changed the whole trajectory of my time in the military. Got in, realized that I had an aptitude, and that it was something that I could excel at, and I was able to do it in a way that prevented other people from having to go in and serve in the same respects that I did. So ended up spending over 15 years in. It was one of those where I said, if I wasn't having fun anymore, I would step away. But every time it was time to re-enlist was a good year. So I kept riding it out. And then my career got cut short on me, unfortunately. And as most senior NCOs try to advise their younger service members against, I was that person who didn't really have a set plan for what to do when I was leaving the military. I had a few ideas of what I thought I could do. The ultimate goal was to really become a history professor down the road, but I thought I would do interim careers in the meantime. Just take my time and slowly get a doctorate. I ended up speaking with a veteran, a Marine veteran, a Vietnam vet who was at Texas A&M of all places, and he had just gotten his doctorate at 74 years old, I believe. And it was really eye-opening. I realized that I did not want to receive my doctorate at 74 years old. And he also advised against doing, multiple careers on your way to doing that. So I decided to go into, full bore into education with a zero idea of what I was doing. Kind of that Marine mentality of just heading headfirst into the wall without really knowing what I was doing. So I enrolled in the local community college, and just took as many classes as I could with kind of a general education focus, knowing that I would go to a 4-year institution. During that time, I went ahead and looked at, hey, what were the best history programs in the country, just to get an idea of, what a target school would be and what I needed to do to get myself heading in that direction. and it popped up all the usual suspects, the Ivy Leagues and the near Ivies and those public Ivies. They all topped the list. And the one that interests me the most was actually Yale University. So on a lark, I reached out to Yale. They had just set up a military liaison. Reached out to Yale, and I reached out with this intention of, hey, I know I can't go to Yale, but what are other schools that are comparable, and what are other schools that would be good for someone like me? And they were adamant that no, you need to apply to Yale, and we want people like you at Yale. This is right around the time that the Ivy League and a lot of the elite institutions across the country were looking to expand their demographics and get into the enlisted ranks of the military veteran. So on that, I started to look at that. I was tied into Warrior Scholar Project, which is just a few years old at that point. Got tied into Service to School. Got some sage advice. Ended up doing very well on the application cycle. And when I sat there and kind of looked at what was best for my family, what was best for myself, and what was best for my future, Princeton University ended up being the best school for me. And moved up here and haven't looked back, with the exception of the little COVID speed bump that we had there. But it's been a very fast and furious journey. Really, it's strange for me to realize that I've been out of the military longer than most people were enlisted in the military at the school. So it's almost been a blink of an eye, but it's been really exciting and fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just want to take a quick step back to your time in the Marine Corps. And obviously, you spent a lot of time in the Middle East. Was your experiences as a Marine, as a Raider, working with local Iraqis and Afghans something that drove your interest in the Middle East, or was it something you had always had?
No, absolutely. So I've always been curious about history, and I've always been curious about global history. But I had a really great career. I was really fortunate in my time in the military. I started off in the infantry, and then ended up in recon, and then ended up at MARSOC, which is just a great organization, and you get to really see the world from a larger perspective than you do in most places in the military. I really got to experience, national strategy and understand, kind of international relations on a different level. So spending time in the Middle East and Africa, I was able to kind of really develop a deeper appreciation for different cultures and different history. It was important for my job, but it was also something that I just took a vested interest in, because I think it's important when you're working with other nations to really have an understanding of how they got there, how they are in the current situation they're in. So that history of the Middle East and the history of that area really was interesting to me and was fascinating to me. But truth be told, it wasn't what I came to school for. I actually came to school thinking I was going to do modern history, looking at kind of U.S. international relations on kind of a grand strategy level. But coming to Princeton University, which is by far the best medieval studies university in the United States, I got bitten by the bug, and somehow I ended up just drifting in that direction. And because of my personal connection to the Middle East, it just felt right. As I'm doing my senior thesis right now, working on a case in Iraq in the ninth century. I have been to these places, which is I'm very fortunate. Not many academics can travel to the Middle East right now, just because of the political tension and the safety aspect. So I've been very fortunate to experience some of these places firsthand. So it's really contributing greatly to my education and my goals.
No, that's great. And so, just for our listeners' education, what does the medieval period encompass in the Middle East?
Well, Alec, that's a fun question, because I think if you ask five professors, you'll get five different answers on what the Middle Ages are. There is kind of a standard answer that goes from kind of the fall of Rome, um, really around the 470s, 470 AD, to around the fall of Constantinople, which is around 1453 AD. However, there's a lot of flexibility in that, where you call late antique and what you call early modern or Renaissance. But myself personally, I'm focusing on kind of the middle period in there, the eighth, ninth, and 10th centuries, because that's a very interesting time in the Middle East, where you have the Byzantine Empire, based out of Constantinople, modern day Istanbul, is really flourishing, has a lot of interaction with the world around it, really is the focus of the world. Baghdad, with the Abbasid Caliphate, which is the second Islamic organization to really kind of run the Middle East. They're in their golden age. You have the Norse, or the Vikings, are coming down, and they're intermingling in the Middle East. You have a lot of trade coming from India and China that needs a lot of study and discussion. And then you also see African trade and African exchange going on during this time. So it's just a really fascinating time in human history, right there in the Middle East, where the world is focused in that area. And unfortunately, the Middle Ages has always been equated to the Dark Ages. It's always, and so it's one of those things that we kind of glance over and skip over in a lot of study. And for me, I think it's a very important stepping stone to get you from that classical or antique period to modern times.
Gotcha. And so that's a very very niche period in history that you got into. Was there a class you took that sparked your interest, or what really drove you to this very very specific time period in Iraq as the area you wanted to focus on?
Well, Alec, I'm obviously very biased here, but I think I go to one of the best undergraduate universities in the country, arguably the world. And I have had just the most amazing professors that I have interacted with. It hasn't been a single class per se, but just a culmination of classes that have centered around medieval history, whether European, East Asian, or Middle Eastern, that has really just sparked this interest in me, and really drove me to find this and find where I can carve out a spot for myself in academia. I've had professors that just have taken a vested interest in me, have really guided me and mentored me in a way that I've never experienced before. um, and it's absolutely amazing, and has made me successful. I give as much credit as possible to the mentors that I've had while I've been here at Princeton. I think they've just been amazing, and really the archetype for what a professor should be in higher education.
No, that's great. Are there any professors in particular you'd like to give a shout out to?
Oh, I would love to. I always have to mention, Professor Teresa Shawcross, Professor Jack Tanous, Professor Helmut Reimitz. They really have helped me immensely in this journey. They've helped educate me outside of the classroom. When you come into academia as a advanced student, as I am, it's a whole new world. So trying to navigate this world, trying to understand this culture, trying to understand what steps you need to take it's a learning curve. And they have made that curve as flat as possible for me. They have made it as easy as it can be. They have helped guide me and show me what directions to go, and show me how to find the things that I'm looking for.
That's awesome, and interested in hearing what it was like starting college in your mid 30s, about 15 plus years older than many of your classmates.
Well, it's definitely fun, and it's definitely eye opening, because I'm a good generation removed from most of my classmates. So it does spark some interesting generational conversations. Um, I've been very fortunate, because of community college is really centers around non-traditional students. So starting my academic career in community college was a nice, smoother transition, because you do have a swath of students going all the way from high school students taking community college classes, on the side, to, those retirees coming back to just take an English literature class. So community college, you blend a little bit more, and it's easier of a transition. When you get to a 4-year institution, especially when you get to the elite institutions in the United States, the demographic does shift. And I am pretty anomalous at Princeton. I have the dubious honor of being the oldest undergraduate on Princeton by quite a few years. It's a badge that I wear proudly, but also under another piece of clothing. So, but it's definitely unique. You learn a lot from the students, and they learn a lot from you. That's one of the things that's important about veterans going back to school, is that interaction and teaching people, working with people who've never had any experience with the military whatsoever. Is interesting to me. It's fascinating, and you get to experience people from all kinds of different walks of life that you wouldn't normally run into, because you kind of get in your circles as you age and as you mature in life. So this pushes you out of your comfort zone. Professors have always been very supportive. Students actually have always been very supportive in my journey. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I think it's been a very positive experience, both for me and everybody that I've interacted with. I like to think that I've given back to the university as much as they've given to me in that interaction.
No, that's awesome. And there's a lot of veterans, I think, that maybe in your position where they're in their mid 30s, completed their time in service, thinking about going back to school, but there's that reservation they have about being the oldest person on campus, about how they can make it work with their family situation. And I think it'd be great if you could share some of your wisdom with them as to how you're able to succeed and make it work with your family.
Well, wisdom might be a bold word there, but I can share my point of view at least. It is it's difficult. It's not easy having a family to balance. It's not easy having those responsibilities to balance. But you have to look at the end goal. You have to look at what you want to do with your life. You have to look at what's important to you, and you can make it work, and you can make it work really well. I've been able to balance, being a father, being a husband, and being a student very well in my time here. But you have to prioritize. You have to have a good schedule. You have to be able to do really the things that make you successful as a service member. If you carry those on to your time in education, you're going to be successful. So it is, there are moments that you do realize that you are older. You do realize that you are different from everybody else. But that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all. And I wouldn't discourage anybody from pursuing education because they're concerned that they may feel a little strange or they may feel out of place. At the end of the day, it's about your education, and it's about, improving yourself. And you're going to find that people are supportive, universities are supportive, administrations are supportive. And I think that nothing should really hold you back. There are in state schools, you have much older individuals going back to get their bachelor's, to finish a bachelor's that they took 40 years off to go do another career. So you're not always going to be the oddity. You're not going always going to be the oldest person on campus. Again, I just have that dubious honor because of Princeton. It's a young school. It's a very traditional school, but most schools aren't like this. State schools, you do have older students. Graduate students, integrate a lot more. So I would encourage anyone who thinks that education is right for them, thinks that they need a degree to pursue their goals, to go back, feel it out, and if you're uncomfortable, maybe that's a good thing. That's when you can get that growth. That's when you can develop. Because if you only sit and just you're comfortable, you're not going to grow and you're not going to develop. And so I would highly recommend going back to school at any age. And it is something that has been really important to me to kind of get that out there, because we have a lot of veterans that come after one enlistment. And that's understandable. They join to be able to go to college, and I understand how important that is. But what we're missing are a lot of those mid-level veterans. We're missing a lot of those, 10 to 15-year veterans who did a good career, but their time was up. They were ready to move on. Well, if you're ready to move on and you're ready to transition to something else, education is going to open that door for you. And I think it's a really good thing to go back to school. And you have to assess what you're comfortable with and what's best for you. Maybe a larger state school, maybe a small liberal arts school, but you can find the place that you're comfortable, and you can find the place that you're going to flourish.
That's awesome, and I'm really interested in hearing about your experience outside of the classroom at Princeton. You mentioned a lot of the veterans were people had just done in an initial enlistment, but what was the veterans community like on campus? And were there any activities you really enjoyed while you were a student?
So when you go to a school like Princeton University, there's just so many opportunities. And I jumped in headfirst into the shallow end, mind you, but I was very excited when I first got here. Um, I did club rugby when I first got here, and met a group of just great guys who, really honestly remind me a lot of veterans. These were these are young guys who just kind of had that veteran mentality, and we would go out there and smash into each other a few times a week, and play against other schools on the weekends. So it was a nice release to do something physical. But we do have veterans who join the crew team. We do have veterans who walked on to different varsity sports here. So that ability to integrate in that way is there. I joined a few clubs that were kind of interesting to myself. I helped restart the Princeton Legal Journal. I was in an organization called Center for International Security Studies. I'm part of the Medieval Studies Colloquium. And then, you have residential colleges, which is a whole nother conversation, but, someone can look that up and understand, what that means for their social life. And then we do have at Princeton in particular, we have a Princeton Transfer Association and a Princeton Student Veterans Club, which obviously have a lot of bleed over and a lot of interaction with each other, as we are veterans and mostly transfers. So we do have a social scene that we try to do events throughout the year. We connect with past veterans from the university. A lot of the alum are fascinated by us and our stories. They really want to get involved and work with us. We get invited to a lot of events solely because we are unique to Princeton, so they kind of want to have their token veteran there, so everybody can corner us and talk to us about what it's like being a veteran at Princeton. But it's also one of those kind of for anybody who's interested in going back to school, to kind of circle back to that. You can be as involved as you want to be, or as little as you want to be. It just really comes down to your comfort level. I've balanced it. Each year I've changed my level of involvement. This is my senior year. I've got a lot of academic requirements on me. I've got a lot of outside of the university requirements on me, and I've pulled back a lot from a lot of the social things in the clubs. We have other veterans here who are, they're writing for the Princetonian. They're in different clubs. They're in all kinds of social organizations. And then we have some veterans who, they really just participate in the Veterans Club, and they're as content as anybody else. And so it's really your comfort level. You have these opportunities at these schools. Don't be afraid to get involved. I promise it is enriching, but it also doesn't have to be part of your academic journey if you don't want it to be.
Gotcha. And how was it on your family? How did you balance spending time with your kids with being fully involved in the Princeton community?
Well, as you can figure out from the 4 years that I've been here, I've been fortunate enough to go through COVID while I was at Princeton. So balancing family life was more trying to find ways away from them, because at some point we were all locked down into my apartment, because Jersey shut down incredibly hard. So I had two children. My wife and I were all in an apartment, all trying to do classes on computers. So that was an interesting balancing act. But under normal circumstances, it's really prioritizing. I put being a father on the top of my list. My professors have always been very supportive of that. I usually do office hours in the very beginning of every semester, explain that I am a father and I will be going to events for my children. I make sure that they are taken care of, and then it comes to me, the kids eat first type situation. And that's worked really well for me. I have a very supportive spouse, so that's also contributed greatly to my success here. But it's just like balancing anything else. Because school is a job. At the end of the day, it is a job. I have to put in my work. I have to put in my hours. I have to do what's necessary. Sometimes that job has very unique hours where, I stop at noon and I pick it back up at 8 o'clock at night. Sometimes I go from 8 to 4, so it's really figuring out how you can balance your schedule and prioritize the things that are important to you. But it's definitely doable. It's definitely a feasible thing for anyone who has a family or dependents.
Very nice. Yeah, having a supportive spouse and family is pretty key. I went through business school when I was married, and it definitely having my wife being patient with me and all school entailed was key to my success. So very grateful for that as well. Just want to switch directions here and talk a little bit about the Sachs Scholarship. Can you tell our listeners what it is and how you ended up applying for it?
Absolutely. So the Sachs Scholarship is a memorial scholarship for Daniel Sachs, who unfortunately his life ended prematurely due to medical complications, and a scholarship was set up in his memory. He has a fascinating story that I really would suggest that people Google the Sachs Scholarship, and you'll find the page on Princeton to read about him. And what it was established so students from Princeton could go to Oxford, which is where he did his master's. It's a fully funded scholarship to Oxford, will help pay for my tuition, will help pay for housing expenses, and will give me a small enough stipend that I can actually get a student visa and stay in country. So it's all encompassing. It's a great opportunity for someone like me who, while I possibly could have got into Oxford on my own accord. However, I wouldn't have been able to afford to go to Oxford. So it's opened up an opportunity for myself and my family that I wouldn't have had otherwise. It How I found it was actually those professors that I mentioned. I, was really talking about my next step in education. And, they've been really driving kind of getting to the UK to do a master's, to, really experience, different pedagogy and really hit the other side of the medieval world, which is across the ocean. They really have a strong focus and a strong history on medieval studies. So as I was looking at that, I really was honest, and I'm like, I don't know if I can afford to do this. It's not easy to move a family across the ocean. It's not easy to, go to school in a foreign country. And they told me to look at these fellowships and look at scholarships. I was very fortunate because I came into it really late. Most people look into them much earlier, but again, ignorance is no excuse. But I just didn't know any better. So with their prompting, I was able to apply in time, and through a pretty rigorous interview and application process, I was awarded the Sachs, which is has really changed the trajectory of my life, and really helped I think is going to make me successful. I believe it's, just a great opportunity. But I also look at this as an award that, is for the community as well. I look at it as an award that, shows that if a veteran is properly supported, they can do anything that any other student on campus can do. It's an honor being the first one in my position to do this. But what I'm hoping is this opens a door for other veterans to, get scholarships like this, to get fellowships like this, and to, continue to show how valuable veterans are in higher education, and show universities that they need to continue to expand these programs and continue to get this underrepresented, demographic into their schools.
Definitely. And is your family excited about the move?
Oh, absolutely. I'm having to prep my children, because it's definitely a big one for them. I've been moving them around a lot, so they're ready to settle. So I don't think they understand that it's just going to be 2 years, but they're really excited. It's something that I've instilled in them because the ability to travel, the ability to experience a different culture. Just living in Oxford, I've really sold them on the whole Harry Potter thing. So it's working out really well for me, and I'm a huge nerd, so I'm looking forward to taking them to castles and walls and just rocks that are on the ground that they're probably not going to be impressed by, but I will. So hopefully they find something that's interesting, and my daughter wants to go hunt for unicorns in Scotland, so hopefully we can find a unicorn.
That's awesome. And so it's a 2-year program you're doing in Oxford. So it's a master's then.
Yeah, it's a master's. So the UK programs they have very interesting names for their degrees, but it's called a Master's of Philosophy. It's going to be in late antique and Byzantine studies. Again, keeping in that Middle Ages Byzantine world. It's a 2-year program. Upon completion of that, I'll be applying to PhD programs back here in the States.
Very cool. And what do you want to do with your PhD?
So the ultimate goal is to be a professor. This is what I came to school to do, was to be a history professor. I had no idea I was going to be a medieval history professor, but I think it's a great opportunity. And plus, it gives me that opportunity to continue to pay this forward, continue to support veterans, continue to show, you can do whatever you want to do when you leave the military, and you have all the skills and all the aptitude that you need to be able to be successful. And so I'm hoping as I continue to progress in my career in academia, that I can continue to support veterans as much as possible. Supporting, organizations like, Warrior Scholar Project and Services School is really important to me. I try my best to get their name out there every chance I have an opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. We appreciate the shout out, and that kind of goes into my last question, which is just taking yourself back about 10 years when you were prepping to leave active duty, figuring out your next step. For our listeners who are in a similar position, what was that 0 to 1 moment for you? What was that first step you took to get yourself on this journey to where you're heading over on this prestigious scholarship?
Well, I think for me at least, I had an instinct. I knew I wanted to be a history professor. History teacher doesn't appeal to me because I just don't like younger children. Um, and you have to watch what you say too much. So I always wanted to be a history professor, and so for me, that's where it was. I took that and I just backwards planned and saw that, hey, I needed a PhD, and because I was coming into this late, I wanted to make sure that I had a good pedigree, and I think that's an important step for everybody, um, to kind of figure out what your end state is, but I don't think that's the end all be all. I think sometimes, just like a 18-year-old who steps foot on a campus, veterans can step foot on campus and figure out what they want to do with their lives just like anybody else. Because you have the opportunity to take classes and experiences experience things that you've never done before. You may find out that you like anthropology. You may come and find out that you have been a philosopher your whole life and you just didn't know it. So I think for those who have that goal, it's great. And it is, I think, a little bit of an easier path because you have a clear path and you know what you want to do. And it actually makes your undergraduate years much easier because you come in with a clear goal and you can really go for that as hard as possible. But it shouldn't limit you. If you're thinking about education, you think college is the right choice for you, you can come in and figure it out just like a teenager, just like anybody else. Just because you're a little bit older doesn't mean you don't get to try things out and experience and succeed and fail like everybody else. And, we get too concerned about failing. We get too concerned about making money. We get too concerned about, hey, I need a job. I need this. Well, education's an investment. And I think, going back to school, I think is a great thing for veterans. I think all veterans should consider it. And if it's right for them, they should head back to school and they can figure it out along the way.
Well, Shaun, congratulations on all your success and best of luck to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been a great experience. I really appreciate talking to you. And I think Services School is just a great organization that helped me with my applications. And I think everybody should try to use it if they're looking to go back to school.
Absolutely.
That's it for this episode. Join us next week, same time, same place, where we share more Service to School stories. Service to School Stories is hosted by Sydney Mathis, the Director of Student Success, and produced by Amanda Tobias, the Director of Communication at Service to School. Service to School is a 501c3 nonprofit providing free college admission support to transitioning service members and veterans. Join us next time and follow us for more on all of your favorite social media platforms.